Sparky, Coach, Pod, Crowy, and Cam here. Just look
So,
at yourself in the mirror and say, "What's up?
what's up?
What's up?" Now, going today, we are to timestamp this. We are what are we? The 13th of May, 2025. So you know what's coming up? My son's sixth birthday, Jasper's birthday. That's coming up. He's going between a lightsaber and a bike, and he wants a spaceship or something crazy. I told him to hang 10 on the bike. Let's work on the spaceship. That's the plan. But talking today, the coming up is end of financial year, June 30. Looming in the shadows, we had our third party session. Our in-house accountant came in and sort of gave us the what to look for in terms of coming up, and because there's some stuff you can do now that you can't do as of July 1. So I would encourage everyone to stop traffic and touch base with your accountant. And if you don't have a good accountant, make sure you get a good accountant. We don't get paid to say this, and Angela's a subcontractor, but I would use, she's incredible. So everyone that comes into our world and they end up moving to her. So if you want her contact, let us know. But I cannot stress to you the importance of having a good accountant that you can back and forth with. Then just think about what makes a good accountant, right? What makes a good accountant? Someone that's responsive, so they'll get back to your call, someone that listens, and someone that's going to go above and beyond for you, and someone that's incredibly knowledgeable. Now, reference those back to your business. Are you that person in your business? Are you responsive? Do you get back to people? Do you know what you're talking about? Like, are you learning? But see people put like plastic boards in commercial. Like, come on, there's just a metal board in there. So are you, I don't know, like heavy commercial, almost industrial? But like,
Yeah.
are you good at your job? And is your company responsive? Do you go over and above for your clients, and do you listen to their needs? Like, it's try and think about what makes an accountant good, or what makes a sandwich shop good. They usually have a good product. Now ask yourself that question about your business. Can you relate that? But so make sure you have a good accountant that you're going to sit with, and if they're charging you, this is funny, but like most accountants crossed over to into like a subscription model or a monthly model because they make a lot more money that way. So make sure the accountant just didn't boost up and they want to sit with you. Just make sure you're getting a fair deal. The fair deal is usually around $2,500 to $2,500 to $3,500 an entity. I would suggest is pretty fair, plus your BASs on top of that. So maybe you're looking bare bones that, and if you've got a lot of moving parts, you can pay 10 grand and you might save 20. So accounting's a really interesting one where you can pay 10 grand. If you're getting the service, you might save 30 grand, you might save 50 grand, you might save 100 grand. As you got to get that right advice at the right time. The wrong advice at the right time, or let's face it, no advice at the right time, is detrimental to your business growth and all that kind of stuff. So you want someone who's forward thinking in terms of, you got a couple of options this time of year. Do you have a really high wage? First and foremost, it's a good reflection on is the wage there? Is the wage and net profit there? That's a great example. But if the wage is there, do you take a high wage to help your borrowing capacity, or do you minimize it to lower your tax liability? So you got to know these things, and you need someone to switched into sort of your zone. But on the accounting, actually, so before I get into what we're actually going to talk about, which is raising your rates, anything to add on the accounting side of
I
things?
think what you said, like have a meeting, obviously. See if you can catch up with your accountant. Well, not see if you must, basically. And if you can't, I'm gonna say it's a red flag to bail on them. So you need, and like I'm talking within the next, like within this month, not in June because it can get a bit too late there. Because a couple of things that obviously you want to flag is there a profit? Is there a substantial profit? Is there a loss? How's it sitting? Because these things start to dictate decisions that you can make that need to be made before the end of financial year, so before June 30. And what I mean by that, some examples are like, okay, are you paying yourself a extra payment? And that can be dressed up multiple ways. It can be obviously it can be a wage, it can be a dividend, it can be a Div 7. Like there's a lot, it really depends on the structure, which is there's sort of no advice given there. It's just the different ways that it can be drawn
Yeah,
upon.
there's zero advice in this. This is presumption. We're not accountants. We're not
Yeah,
trained. Where this is to be taken, this
considerations.
information is to be taken as questions to your accountant.
Yeah.
Stuff we've
So having
learned.
a look at what you're doing with that surplus, because there's when I mean surplus, as in the extra profit that you have there, what can you do with it? So is there an asset to purchase? Is there money to go into superannuation? Is there money that needs to be dispersed in other ways through other entities that you may or may not have associated with the business? So there's lots of different things to take into consideration. Really simple things, turning back a little quickly, like assets. So can be vehicles, plant, equipment, or tools. Too late on the 1st of July because that tax invoice will be dated. So you need to have these discussions so you can make these decisions before June 30, because that July 1 purchase is 365 days away from being able to be claimed in the correct manner as such. So these are considerations to take into account to having a look at before the end of the year. By taking this information, having a discussion, you've got a bit of an idea. I do want to preface by saying also too is we really do push. We don't really just push mandatory that we close every month. So by doing that, you should have a bit of a rough idea how you're traveling anyway. So one of Crowley's pet hates, in particular, is people who only know how they're tracking at the end of June 30. So they catch up with their accountant in July. And it's like, well, that year was a write-off. Let's just go again. And what's the definition of what is it, insane? Like just doing the same thing repetitively, not changing anything. Don't know.
Close. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result.
Yeah, differing result. Yeah. So I think I've mixed two up there, but anyway, yeah. So you should have a rough idea when you start tracking your numbers and start identifying how you're going and doing the measuring of it all. You've got an idea. So I think it's really about being educated, and hopefully you aren't just looking at the numbers come sort of May, June, and being like, oh, how did we go last August? How did we go last July? It's like, hey, you're able to correct the course, correct that ship, become a captain, a skipper of that boat. That's probably all I've got to add, just those considerations to take into account when you're meeting with your accountant.
And your personal situation is so incredibly different to someone else's. You know, do you have investment properties? Is there a wholesale bill you need to delay or push forward to lower your tax or maximize your income? Super, can you chuck something in there? And on the super fund, this might seem like, I don't want you to sit here and listen to this and be, oh, that's ages away, but can you begin to plan for 5 or 10 years time? So in other words, can you begin to be like, you know, in 7 to 10 years time or 5 years time, I want to buy a commercial property in my self-managed super. I'm going to start to chip away at that. I'm going to have a little plan in place. That's a huge one. And then you've got bad debt write-off. If you had a bad debt or someone hasn't paid, but speak to your accountant about that. But there are ways you can chop and change things. So my encouragement is you need to know this stuff. Like it's no good just burying your head in the sand and just assuming everything will be okay. So just get in front of someone. And this is why this is why I personally like Angela, and to go back on what we were kind of talking about before, like a really common thing is people feel annoying calling their accountant, and you don't want to have that feeling. You know, you want to be able to be like, oh, book a meeting at this point. Hey, can you give me a call? You want contact, and you don't want to ever, if you feel like bad or just make sure you're feeling like you can ask a silly question and get an answer. Now, there's no such thing as stupid questions, just stupid people, according to South Park. there's no such thing as stupid questions. And I think, like, I just flash back to the start of my electrical journey, coming from an aircon background. I remember I had to put in a point of attachment bracket. No idea. Like, no idea what like the regulations, the heights,
You hung the meter and connected it to the network yourself.
Yeah, I was like, what is this? Where is the outdoor unit going? Like, what do I do with my hands? I remember calling level 2 guy.
Isolator doing.
Yeah, we had this sort of one level 2 guy. If you're from the Sutherland Shire and you can flash back 20 years ago, you probably know who I'm talking about. This sort of grumpy, disgruntled guy. He was maybe the only guy there. He was great and good at his job, but in terms of answering the phone or giving you a polite response or responding to an email, not going to happen. And I remember,
Very personal.
yeah, yeah. And he was the only option. Everyone was like, you got to use this guy, got to use this guy. And he was getting into that stage level 1 work, which I think a lot of level 2s eventually end up working for, Osgrid or whatever, insert your local energy provider here kind of thing, or state energy provider. So it's like they end up doing poles or line work because that's where the money is, right? And that's where the demand is at that point. So then who can blame them? But I remember I was really feeling really awkward and bad to call him, and it was just so uncomfortable, and he made it uncomfortable. That's why I was uncomfortable. So if you're uncomfortable like that, it might be for a reason. And then I finally met this guy, give him a shout out, Len Franks, who actually looks incredibly so much like Papa Smurf. You have no idea.
Really?
You remember Papa Smurf from the Smurfs?
Yeah,
He looks maybe the spitting image. I think he might be retired by now. But I remember when he came into our life as a level 2, and I called him and asked him a few questions. He would always answer the phone. I'd never seen him be late. He never made me feel like a burden. He always listened to me. I must have asked him what the max height of a point of attachment bracket is, maybe 100 times. Like I would have asked the same, like, what height is that again? And my whole theory is like, yeah, you got to retain information, but like you have a limit. Like no one tries to remember all the phone numbers in your phone book. If you can call someone and get an answer, shout out to Andrew Harding, the walking rule book, we used to call him. If you needed any answer about the standards, you just call him. It wasn't even worth knowing it. You just call him and you're like, oh yeah, that's Amendment A, subclause B, page 47. He would just be on top of it. But on that, I'm just saying my life was so much easier when I found someone who was responsive, who answered the phone, who was kind, who was polite, who was just cool to deal with. So 2 things: deal with cool people in your business and your personal life, and be cool to deal with. No one's saying you can't make money. No one's saying anyone can't make money, but just be cool and polite to deal with, and be respectful and be responsive, and you'll do excellent things in business. But we are sitting here today. The point of this is to raise your rates. Now, there's a couple of times in your business where you can raise your rates. July 1 is an absolute, probably the first one that comes to mind. New financial year, you're looking at new superannuation goes from 11.5 to 12%. Lots of costs go up, usually in a financial year. We'll get to that in a sec. Wages, usually a lot of people have meetings in April or May for a pay rise in July. So it's a very common thing in terms of new year, new you, like new financial year, new costs associated with lots of things. That's extremely normal. So July 1 comes to mind. January 1 comes to mind. Not a financial year, but a calendar year. And then the other best way to raise your rates is today. So it's like, but I want to talk about this because July 1's a fantastic time to raise your rates. Now, on that, we're going to go through sort of how to go about doing that. But I just want to flag as well. I know people are like, oh, I don't work off an hourly rate. I work off a price book. And you can just like, you need to, everyone's going off a net profit. So if you're not going off an element of hourly rate, how are you quoting? Essentially you're going like, that job's going to take me 100 hours at $120 an hour equals this, plus my materials and a margin. Like that's usually how people will quote. Price book or not, it can be reverse engineered back to an hourly rate. Whether you're specifically engaging in cost plus work or labor materials quote or a price book, everything gets reversed back to a profit per hour or a labor rate per hour or an opportunity cost per hour or a net profit per job. And that's how you want to look at things. So on your job management system, Simpro, ServiceMate, Monday, people use Fergus. We don't discriminate, although you would probably die on a hill for Simpro. We don't discriminate. But you got to look at it and be like, can you just auto adjust your rate? You need to move north. At some point, your rates need to move north 3 to 5% every single year. No questions about it. Are you going to turn up to the job you're halfway through? Let's say you're at a cost plus job and you're halfway through it. you can't just turn up on July 1 and charge different rates, in my opinion, without a discussion. So you want to set some precedent and be like, yeah, every single year our rates go up 3%. Hey, we want to honor that job, but as a next job, it's going to go up to this point. So I want to flag, like, first and foremost, I guess let's go through the importance of raising it, and then I want to go through how to raise it. But what's trickling through your head right now?
Guess the considerations, like you touched on there, like what are the forces that, like the external forces that are affecting the cost of operating your business. I think it's really important to be aware of that. Obviously, you've mentioned them all, but probably do want to remind everyone the big one. Obviously, superannuation goes up by 0.5%. Obviously, there's going to be your external operational costs. So immediately the things that come to mind is insurances. They never not go up. They are designed to go up. That's how that's how they make money. So your insurances will go up. There's a chance that if you're renting a property, or you have a lease on a property, or you're renting the property from yourself, as in like an entity that you have, that there's probably an increase every year. Whether that falls on July 1 or not, it's highly unlikely, because it's probably linked to the actual dates of the lease. But be aware of that, particularly if it's your own entity. So I'm saying that you own an industrial shed in either a super fund or a company or something that you own, and you're circling the life of the money around in a nice sort of kumbaya around a fireplace way where everyone wins. That you actually are doing that market increase as well, because it's beneficial, and it not only is it beneficial, it's real world. Because if you weren't in that situation, you're not operating in a real world sense. So they're the influences. There'll be your work covers, or your insurances associated with work cover of some sort. They will also increase as well. And then, regos, like there's a lot of fixed costs that are going to obviously increase operationally. And I think it's important to be aware of them, and that they do occur. Don't just like, why have my cost of ops gone up $5,000 this year? This is, and like blow up sort of thing. It's like, no, they've gone up because that's the world we live in. Costs increase. So the other one that has obviously an impact on it all is the wages side of things, obviously. So how you go about it, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what you should and shouldn't do around it, but I think it's nice to have some kind of continuity to it around that you operate with it. And a clean way to do it, I've always found, is July 1, and then it puts everyone on the same page. So it can be written into their contract that's when it's reviewed. It can be verbally communicated to them. It becomes nice and easily structured around, hey, this is what happens now.
Yeah, and any sort of pay rise, you want to try and on cost that. So if you were paying $45 an hour for something you're now paying 50 for, let's just paraphrase that. If your rates don't move, you're making $5 less per hour, essentially. So the same rate becomes your net profit decreases pretty quickly out of that. So you got to look at that. You want to be on the right side of the stuff. A great thing to do holistically. It's not always as black and white as this, but every year your rates go up 2 to 5%. Every year your tradies and apprentices and admin staff go up 2 to 5%. So as we on cost, we pass on. As we on cost, we pass on. The trouble is, we've got no dramas as business owners being kind and generous and passing on all this, oh yeah, give pay rise. But it's time for you to get your pay rise. It's time for you to raise your rates. It's time for you to be dialed into your money, dialed into your finances, dialed into your gross profit and net profit, enough to make good and educated decisions. So, and just to paraphrase that whole thing, you want to be on the right side of it. So what Cam was saying before about, I get to end the year, my operating expense went up $5,000 less this year. You want to be on the other side of that. You want to be preempting your $5,000, you want to be preempting that and then on costing that, so it's not a surprise. So you're financially, people sometimes, let's just say you're looking at a job and it's a service and maintenance job, and you're looking to make 20%, net profit, whatever. So let's just go 20. The goal for anything under $5,000 is 30 to 40%. There's no questions about that. So you look at it and you'll be like, I think too often as a business owner, we sit trying to make, instead of making 30, we shoot for 25 when you should be shooting for 35. 30 is 25. 35 is 30, if that sort of makes sense. So it's like your best effort to, I think too often we're trying to be on the polite side or the underachieving side, or we're trying to overestimate what we can achieve and we fall short. But why not try and underestimate what you can achieve and fall a little bit ahead of the line? Why not try and finish the race and finish it well? That's sort of my 2 cents. So coming into sort of how to go about raising your rates, early on in business, I sent out a generic email to everyone. Hey guys, rates going up. And it's an aggressive, yeah, let me just phrase, emails or anything not in person is cold as ice. It's just super cold.
Well, I feel like it can just be interpreted so, like, it's like a full 180. It can be, oh yeah, Crow's a good bloke, that's cool, I'm happy with that. Or it could be like, Crowy!
Yeah. I remember I got an email back from our best client, and I just thought that was the only way I knew how to do it. I don't know what year this was, 2011, something like that. And I sent, hey, rates going up, blah, every July 1. And then she responded. She was a legend. We got along really well. And then she was like, oh, rate rises always suck, but we understand. But I think you've got to look at sending that to everyone. It's like, do they actually really need to know? It's like telling them you're going on a long weekend kind of thing. Yes, of course, they need to know if the price of something they paid for yesterday, they're going to pay different for on July 1. They need to know that, but can you pop into site and have that conversation? So I guarantee you probably got, of your 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 clients, there's probably between 5 and 10 where you probably need to have that conversation in person. There's 3,000 of them that are residential Betty, that her PowerPoint off your price book is going to go from 150 to 165 or from 200 to 230. Sweet. Like, who cares? That's a non-thing when you're talking about $30. But when you're talking about people you do lots of work for and your price is shifting a little bit, that's a conversation that can happen in person. So my takeaway is always like, try and work out, if you're raising your rates, who needs to know? Because if it's off a price book and you're quoting a residential, say new build, duplex, whatever, maybe you can be, hey, a price was gone from 120 for this item to 127 just to suit the new needs. Sweet. Okay, now they've got context to why your price is different. That could be a phone call. I think the stronger the relationship, the more you can have a phone call. You know what I mean? Like that. So if I can have a phone call with Elodie about really hectic or deep or whatever, doesn't really matter. It's like, we're cool, yeah, sweet. Because that's how you want to be. You want to be doing business with people that are like family in a way. You can have big converse with and just sort of move on in that sort of way. So it's like, they're flashing back to it. I probably wouldn't go on the generic email cold as ice send out. I'd go, okay, who are the 5 or 10 people that need to know? So maybe you're working at a pub right now and it's cost plus. And it's okay, sweet. So I've started this job on X rate. I can't just go change it. So I'm going to have that conversation now saying, hey, we're going to honor that through, but the next job we start, we're going to be moving to this rate. So I think you can do it really, kind. And I remember when I first did my cost of ops properly and worked out exactly my break-even rate. So I remember having this conversation with our biggest client at that point. And I was just said, hey, look, I've just done this cost of ops. It's landed, my break-even's here. I need to move it to this point. But can we meet halfway and then go the next round and, go halfway, then 6 months up a little bit and the other 6 months we're on, because that client wasn't worth rocking the boat that much. You know what I mean? So I think it is a bit of a case by case situation. I don't think you can have a blanket rule on, I just send the email I just send this. I think if you've just finished a job for Betty and her ceiling fans were 250, now they're 275, maybe that's just a care phone call for the next quote you put forward. If you don't have an upcoming job for Betty, you're not going to call her. Why would you call her? Why would she be aware? A price rise can sometimes highlight, if you're on the rocks with a client, which happens, if you've been in business for a while, it happens. So you've had a staff member performed something that wasn't great. Maybe you said you're going to get there, you ran out of time. Maybe you forgot about a job. Maybe your admin had a bad day and had a go at them. Like, stuff just happens as a business owner. So it's like you basically just want, if you send a generic email out and people are on the edge of whether to use you or not, it might just tip them over the edge too far. But stuff those guys. People don't like dealing with difficult people. So that's sort of my 2 cents. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can echo pretty much very similar thoughts around it all. Is that it first and foremost, like who actually needs to know, like who desperately needs to know this, and how does it impact? I think what I really think about here is like understanding your costs and knowing your numbers is the easiest way to put it. Like, so having a real fundamental understanding of like, hey, what is our break even? Like, or what is the what is the net profit that we have that we can make on our tradies, or group the tradies between seasoned tradies and your relatively green ones, because there's generally sometimes a disparity between the pays that you might have on experience, and group understanding your apprentices as well, like where the money is made and lost on them, right through to your materials, and like having a general understanding, because you may have contracts in place with clients, so you may have tenders in place and have an understanding that hey, it's a 3-year contract at a fixed rate for the whole time, so that you can't on cost that. So you need to forecast what potentially it could be. I do just want to flag one thing that the this is the last year of a number of consecutive years. I think it's been about 5 or 6 years in a row, where superannuation's gone up by 0.5%. So this year it goes to 12, and then for the foreseeable future, it's sticking at that for the next 3 years, where it's forecasted to. So just from an understanding point of view, that was a government-led decision a number of years ago. I digress back. Yeah, so having an understanding of the numbers side of things, so that you know that you can't, if you have a contract in place with someone on a tender that you went in, it's like, I can't do that. You may have a tender in place with a contract where it's actually written into it, where it increases each year, where you've actually forecasted, hey, these are the costs, this is where it increases it too. So having a fundamental understanding, and really simply, what is the relationship with the person and who needs to know, right, around it, and to what extent. Generally, like, I'm going to blanket just a bit of a rule of thumb that I would apply. If they're aware of what the hourly rate is as such, or what rate you're charging them. So in instance, you're working off a cost plus scenario. So it's very like it's extremely transparent. Um, that's a conversation you want to have, right? If it's relatively lumped in together in regards to, hey, like we price a lot of the work, and it's a fixed cost that comes into it, um, they're not going to really, I'll be honest, they're probably not going to care in that sense, because they just want to know, like, these are the 250 things we want done, what's it going to cost us, basically, or these are the 20 things ones, I think 20 things that we want to go, that we want to have costed, what's it going to cost us. So I sort of look at it really clearly in that sense, and it's a conversation that needs to be had first and foremost wherever possible in person, and if it can't be done in person, it needs to be done in a phone call, because it needs to be done to show that you've got some warmth and some understanding coming across, in your tone of voice, in your mannerisms, with way your body language, with the way you're displaying yourself. You need to have that, and I'm going to say a reasonable person, and I'm going to put that probably in like inverted commas. A reasonable person is understanding, and what I mean by that is that a reasonable person who understands business, because you're dealing with someone who is in business more than likely, a reasonable person is going to be understanding. And I would sit here and say, if the person acts irrationally, you need to either A, check how it was delivered to them, right? So how did you deliver that conversation to them? Was it done in a manner that, the response was appropriate, sort of thing? Or is this someone you actually want to be working with? I think that needs to be considered all the time. And the reason I feel that way is because what else is going to become difficult if they're not being reasonable to a reasonable request? It put simply in that way. So that's probably where I landed there in regards to how you conveyed it to them and sort of wrap up my thoughts around it.
Nice. And also just to highlight, so let's just say you've got 5 staff members that got $3 an hour. You know, apprentices organically are going to go up every single year, but your apprentice rate probably remains, or your team rate probably remains relatively pure. So if you've got 5 staff members to go up $3 an hour, that's $15 an hour. No, let's not even take it in consideration the super ramifications, which is, you know, a little bit, but it still adds up. So that's $15 an hour. So so you're losing $120 a day, or not making what you used to. That's $600 a week. That's $30,000 a year different. So it's all good to be like, yeah, sometimes you feel a bit like Oprah. You get $3. You get $3. You get $3. And at the end of the year, you're like, where's my 30 grand? You bastard. So it's like, it's really interesting to talk about. Also to highlight, you know, if a member comes in to us, we're obviously like pretty hell bent on numbers and net profits and pricing jobs well and handling jobs well and that kind of stuff. Sometimes the numbers take sort of 2 years to iron out. So if someone comes into us now and they're heavy on the project realm, they might be living in the fruit or starting a job they priced 12 months ago that's going to go for 18 months. So it's like, you know, you think about mispricing a job 12 months ago that you're currently in the fruit of. Now you're probably going to take all your progress claims early, and you're going to get left with an empty cup at the end of it. So you're not going to feel the ramifications of a largest job that you mispriced for maybe 18 months. By the time you start the job, finish the job, and you get left with a tax bill, wholesaler bill, labor bill, you know, insert bill here, your project management bill that is not covering. So it's like, just try and be on the right side of everything. So currently, if you're pricing a project now, it's going to start in 12 months, you're pricing for 2026, 27. You know, so try and factor that stuff in. You've got to be on the right side of all this stuff. So my 2 cents are, like Cam said before, if you got to have the call, if you got to have that convo, have a difficult convo, have it in person, preferred. Have it in a phone call, next one. And if all else fails, just send an aggressive text message in capitals, in the large font. Nice. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Gotcha.